Andre here with Andre the Alpha, and today we need to talk about Call of Duty Black Ops 7. I spent the last few days with the game, and honestly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what this game was trying to do. What was Activision thinking here? This is one of those reviews where I'm not going to sugarcoat anything, but I'm also not going to dogpile on it just because it's popular to hate Call of Duty right now. I've been playing this franchise for about almost 2 decades, and I've seen the highs and the lows, and Black Ops 7 is definitely complicated. And before we dive in, I do want to be clear about something. I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm here to share my genuine experience with the game after spending dozens of hours with it. Whether you're a hardcore Call of Duty fan or someone who just plays for the campaign, or just curious whether this is worth your 70 bucks or your Game Pass subscription, I'm going to break down everything you need to know. And look, I know a lot of people have already made up their minds about the game before even touching it, but I think it deserves a fair shake, even if that fair shake reveals a lot of problems. Let's talk about what Black Ops 7 is trying to be, because that's important for content and understanding why it feels the way that it does. This is Activision's attempt to throw everything at the wall and just see what sticks. We got a 4-player co-op campaign that's mandatory online, 16 multiplayer maps at launch, a return to classic round-based zombies, and the new PvE extraction style in-game mode set in the city of Avalon. On paper, that all sounds like great content, right? And it is, but here's the thing that I learned pretty quickly. Quantity doesn't equal quality, and Black Ops 7 is definitely the case here. It feels like they spread themselves way too thin, trying to do everything that they forgot to make sure that anything was actually fun to play. The game takes about years after the events of Black Ops 2, with David Mason having killed Raul Mendez, and now we're playing as Troy Marshall from Black Ops 6, dealing with the return of Mendez through some convoluted plot involving a PMC called the Guild that makes robots and uses fear gas called the Cradle, some weird crap going on. If this sounds confusing, trust me, it doesn't get any clearer as you play, but we'll get into the story problems a bit later. So let me talk about the elephant in the room, the campaign. And man, this is where things get really rough. I'm someone who generally loves Call of Duty campaigns, and look, I know that's not the popular opinion these days, but there's something about those blockbusters, over the top set pieces that I've always found entertaining, even when they were ridiculously stupid. Black Ops 6 had some generally cool moments, even in Modern Warfare 3, which was clearly rushed, had a few missions that were fun to play through. Black Ops 7 campaign though, this legitimately might be the worst campaign in the entire series, and I don't say that lightly. The core problem that is designed as a mandatory 4-player co-op experience, but it's not fun to play with other people. Let that sink in for a second. They built the entire campaign around playing with the team, but the actual experience of playing with the team ranges from tedious to actively frustrating. I tried playing through with randoms and matchmaking, and it was a freaking disaster. Half of the cutscenes are unskippable, which means that you and 3 other people are forced to sit through long, boring dialogue sequences where there's nothing interesting happening, and I'm not talking about quick transitions. Some of these cutscenes drag on for minutes at a time. Even if one person in your squad hasn't seen them yet, everyone has to wait. Then there are these puzzle sections that only one player can actually do anything with, while the other 3 just stand around doing nothing. It's baffling from a design perspective. If you're going to force me to play with 3 other people, give us all something to do. It's not that hard. Don't make 3/4 of the squad into spectators for arbitrary puzzle moments that aren't even challenging or interesting. It's like they had an idea for co-op, but they never actually thought through what makes co-op fun. The mission structure itself is all over the place. You got these linear, heavy scripted levels that feel like they're trying to recapture the old Call of Duty magic, but flat. And then you got these open combat missions set in Avion that are somewhat even worse than the ones in Modern Warfare, and I don't even think that's possible somehow. These sections are just massive, empty spaces, scattered enemies that barely do anything. Most of the time I found it easier just to sprint past everything because actually engaging with the enemies felt like a waste of time. They're just bullet sponges that take the entire mag to kill, and even when you're playing with a full squad, they just crank up the health even more to compensate. It's artificial difficulty in the worst way possible. What makes the campaign especially frustrating is that glimpses of what could have been interesting. The game uses these cradle fear gases as a narrative device to send you into these hallucination sequences sequences that are callback to previous Call of Black Ops games. In theory, that's a cool idea. Time travel missions through memories, revisiting iconic moments, but in execution, it's just an excuse to reuse old maps and assets with the thin coat of "this is a hallucination" paint slapped all over it. One mission has you fighting a hallucination of who teleports around like he's in a Marvel movie, and you're dodging giant machetes falling from the sky while he screams "suffer" over and over again. It's this very cartoonish and over the top that makes it cross from entertaining and just to being annoying. And then there's the story itself, which is, look, Call of Duty stories are usually pretty stupid anyway, but this one was extremely stupid. That's not news at all, but they're usually stupid in an entertaining blockbuster kind of way. Black Ops 7 story is just boring and incoherent. It starts up with this big setup where Mendez is back, except immediately they reveal that it was just a deep fake and the real villain is someone else. Then they spend about 2 more missions spectating that it actually might be Mendez involved somehow. It's like they couldn't decide what story that they wanted to tell, so they just threw out every idea that they had, hoped it would cohere into something. Spoiler alert, it never did. By the end, I completely checked out of whatever what they were trying to say. The dialogue was laughably bad, the characters are one-dimensional, and the plot twists were so telegraphed that you could see them coming from a mile away. Trash story. I want to talk about the always online requirement because it compounds every problem with the campaign. Even if you're playing solo, you need a constant internet connection. If you're idle for too long, you get kicked. If there's a Call of Duty update, you get kicked. And the worst part here, no mission checkpoints. If you get kicked or have any reason to leave before you see that mission complete screen, you have to start the entire mission over from the beginning. That's insane. I had a mission crash on me about 40 minutes in. Back when I loaded back in, I was at the very start. That's not acceptable in 2025. Even games as a service title have figured out how to implement reasonable checkpoint systems. There's no technical reason for this. It's just terrible design. The campaign has also no difficulty options if you're playing solo, which makes it feel even more bare bones, and you can't pause ever. If you need to step away for any reasons, you're just at the mercy of the game kicking you for inactivity. It's like they designed the campaign with the explicit goal of respecting your time as little as possible. The only saving grace is that it's mercifully short. I finished it under 5 hours, and that included dying multiple times on the final mission, which is legitimately one of the worst missions in Call of Duty games history. It just throws endless waves of the tankiest enemies at you in tight corridors without interesting mechanics, or it's not challenging in a fun way, it's just boring and tedious. Now let's move on to something that's actually decent, the multiplayer. The standard 6v6 versus mode in Black Ops 7 is fine. Actually, they're better than fine. If you're someone who plays Call of Duty primarily for the competitive multiplayer, you'll probably have a good time here. It's gone back to the classic 3-lane map design that defined the Black Ops series, and while not all 16 maps are winners, most of them are at least competent. The movement feels snappier than Black Ops 6, but not as heavy as Modern Warfare, which actually I think is a good middle ground. Black Ops 6 felt a little too fast and chaotic. This feels a lot more controlled. And they've also lightened up the skill-based matchmaking, and I know that's a sensitive topic in the community, but personally I think it's improvement. Matches feel less like every game is a sweat fest and more like there's room to experiment and have fun. You'll get in lobbies where you're getting stomped or doing the stomping, but it doesn't feel like the game is constantly trying to force you into a 50% win rate through algorithm matchmaking sorcery. The gunplay, which is really the core of any Call of Duty experience, feels excellent. This is something the series has always done well, and in Black Ops 7 there's no exception here. The weapon feedback, the sound design when you're firing guns, the recoil patterns, it all feels responsive and super satisfying. I do have a little complaint about the time to kill feels slightly too fast in some cases, and the visibility can be an issue on certain maps, but overall the movement to movement shooting is very solid. What I appreciate about the multiplayer is the progression system. Everything you do in any mode levels up your account and your weapons, which means if you want to experiment with the gun but don't want to tank your kill death ratio in competitive matches, you can take it into campaign or zombies and level it up there. It's a smart system that rewards you for engaging with all the content, and it gives you that constant sense of progression that keeps you coming back. The weapon customization is deep with multiple attachment slots and a loadout system that lets you make meaningful choices about how you want to build your classes. Do you sacrifice a primary attachment for an extra perk? Do you run a silencer and give up range? There's these kind of decisions that make multiplayer feel like it has beyond just point and shoot. With that being said, multiplayer isn't perfect. There's this weird disconnect between how good the shooting feels and how unsatisfying it can be to actually play. It's hard to explain, but matches feel hollow. You can win, you can be top of the leaderboard, but it doesn't feel as rewarding as it should. Part of this might be the sound design, oddly is muted and flat compared to other modern shooters. Guns just don't have punch and weight that makes every feel impactful. Part of it might be the visual presentation, which brings me to one of the more controversial aspects of the game, the AI generated art. Look, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on AI art, but it's pretty obvious when you're looking at Black Ops 7. Operator backgrounds, posters in the environment, various UI elements, they all have that telltale AI generated look. And here's what bothers me about this. Call of Duty is the best-selling game franchise on the planet. Activision makes billions from this series. The fact that they're cheaping out on art and using AI generation instead of paying their talented art team to create original work is just insulting. It's insulting to the artists who work on these games, and it's insulting to the players who spending $70 should be a premium experience. This extends to the map design as well, where several maps are just reworked versions of maps from previous games. Now, to be fair, Call of Duty has been doing this for years. Remakes, remasters, all part of the franchise's DNA at this point. But when you combine it with AI art and the general feeling that corners were cut everywhere that they could be, it starts to paint a picture that a game that was made as cheaply and quickly as possible to meet a release date. And that's frustrating because you can see the potential. The core gameplay is solid, the framework is there for a really good multiplayer experience, but it feels like it needed another 6 months in the oven to really polish everything and give it the attention that it deserves. One thing that I do want to praise is the variety of the game modes available at launch. You got your team deathmatch, your domination, search and destroy, all the classics are there, but they've also brought back some fan favorites that have been missing from recent entries. The mode rotation feels healthy, and I never had trouble finding matches in any of the modes that I wanted to play. The netcode feels super solid. I didn't experience any significant lag or hit any registration issues, which has been a problem in previous Call of Duty games. Whatever they're doing on the back end for the multiplayer infrastructure, it seems to be working well. Now let's talk about zombies, because this is where Black Ops 7 actually does something right. The new map, Ashes of the Dam, is a return to classic round-based zombies, and it's genuinely fun to play. For those of you who might be familiar with how the game works, you and up to 3 other players fight increasingly difficulty waves of zombies, earning points for kills and surviving rounds. You use those points to unlock areas of the map, buy weapons and upgrades, and activate various power-ups and perks that make you stronger. What made Ashes of the Dam work is that it feels focused. Unlike the campaign, which is trying to do way too many things, Zombie knows exactly what it wants to be. A challenging survivor mode that rewards map knowledge, teamwork, and smart resource management. The map itself is well designed with multiple distinct areas that open up as you progress, giving you new options for training zombies and finding better positions. There are vehicles that you can drive for location, which adds a fun element, and the pack-a-punch machine that lets you upgrade your weapon is satisfying to work toward. The difficulty curve is well tuned as well. Early rounds you get your bearings and build up points, but by 10 or 15 rounds, things start to get challenging. The zombies move faster, hit harder, and come in large number. Specialty enemy types show up to mix things up as well, and if you're not working together with your team and communicating about where threats are coming from, you'll get overwhelmed very fast. The exfiltration system is a nice touch too. Every 10 rounds and then every 5 rounds after that, you'll have the option to call in an extraction and leave with all the XP and rewards that you earned. It adds a risk versus reward element where you have to decide, do I out now or do I push for a few more rounds to maximize my gains? Stay too long and you might lose everything you've earned. Traditionally, I'm not a huge zombie player. I'll jump in for a few rounds here and there, but it's never been my main reason for playing Call of Duty. But I found myself genuinely enjoying Ashes of the Dam. It has the perfect blend of accessible enough for casual players to have fun with, but deep enough for hardcore zombie fans to really sink their teeth into. The Easter egg quest that's hidden throughout the map adds another layer for people who want to dig deeper to the lore and the secrets. And because the shared progression system, all the time that you spend as zombies is helping you level up your account and your weapons. So it never feels like you're wasting your time, even if you're not a big zombie specialist. That brings us to the PvE in-game mode, which is probably the most interesting thing about Black Ops 7. After you complete the campaign, which is again about only 5 hours, you unlock the extraction shooter style mode set in the Avalon map. If you play games like Escape from Tarkov or The Division's Dark Zone, you'll have an idea of what it's going for. You drop into the map with up to 3 other players, complete objectives, fight AI enemies, collect loot and for better weapons, and then extract before time runs out or you die. This mode is actually fun, but it's kind of shocking how much better it is than the campaign, considering how they both use the same Avalon map and similar mechanics. The difference is that in the in-game mode, you have agency. You can choose which objectives to tackle, which areas to the map to explore, and where to extract. It's not forcing you through a linear sequence of poorly designed missions. You're given the freedom to engage with the space in whatever way makes sense for your playstyle and your team composition. The loot system here is more robust than the actual campaign. Weapons have different rarity tiers, and finding a high tier weapon with good attachments feels rewarding. There's also upgrade stations scattered around the map where you can improve your character's ability. The enemy AI, while still not perfect, feels more aggressive and dangerous than the campaign, probably because it's not tuned for all players all the time. Playing solo in the end game is actually viable and a fun way to experience it, which is way more than I can say for the campaign mode. Again, trash story in the campaign. My main criticism of the in-game mode is that you have to play through the entirely crappy campaign just to unlock this. This is a baffling decision. If your best PvE content is locked behind your worst content, you're actively preventing people from enjoying your game. I would guess a significant percent of players will bounce off the campaign before they ever see the in-game mode, which is a shame because this is generally the highlight of the PvE offerings. If Activision has any sense, they'll patch the game to let people access the mode immediately or after completing a couple of rounds of just the introductory missions of the campaign. Forcing people through 5 hours of that awful co-op campaign to experience the good stuff is just bad design. Let's talk about the technical state of the game because this is another area where Black Ops 7 stumbles. Performance wise, it runs okay on my system. I'm playing on a high-end PC with a modern GPU and I was getting stable frame rates at high settings, but I've seen reports from people from older hardware on consoles struggling with optimization. Textures pop in, frame rate drops during the intense action sequence, and the occasional crashes have all been reported across all platforms. None of this is game breaking, but for a franchise that is established as Call of Duty, you expect a more polished launch. The UI and the menu systems continue to be a disaster, which is on par for the course of the modern Call of Duty. The whole Call of Duty HQ launcher that combines Warzone, Modern Warfare, and now Black Ops 7 into this confusing interface is needlessly complicated. Let me just launch the game that I want to play without having to navigate through 12 different menus and sub-menus. At least Black Ops 7 has its own dedicated start screen once you pass the launcher, which actually makes getting into the modes that you want to play relatively straightforward. There's also the matter of the microtransactions, which is inevitable in modern Call of Duty games. At launch, they're reactively subdued, but we all know how that goes. Give it a couple months and the store will be filled with ridiculous operator skins, weapon blueprints, and whatever other cosmetic junk they can sell. I'm personally not a fan of the battle pass system or the constant pushing of in-game purchases, but I also recognize this is a business model and it's not going away. Maps and modes are free post-launch, so you're not fragmenting the player base with map packs like the old days used to. So where does all of this leave us? What's the verdict on Call of Duty Black Ops 7? Here's the thing, it's a game that's actively fighting against itself. The multiplayer is solid, the zombies is generally good, and the in-game PvP mode is fun. But the campaign is sharply bad and it threatens to drag everything else down with it. And that matters big time because for a lot of people, myself included, the campaign is a big part of why we buy Call of Duty games. We want that 4 to 8 hour blockbuster action experience, even if it's dumb and over the top. Black Ops 7 doesn't deliver that. Instead, it delivers a boring, frustrated co-op slog that feels like it was designed by people who don't understand what makes fun co-op gaming. So if you're someone who exclusively buys Call of Duty for the multiplayer and doesn't care about the campaign at all, Black Ops 7 is a solid entry. The shooting feels great, the maps are decent, and there's enough content at launch to keep you busy. If you're a zombie fan, Ashes of the Dam is a worthy addition to the mode's legacy, but if you're like me and you value the complete package, if you game that respects your time and delivers quality across all modes, Black Ops 7 is a hard $70. The more I think about it, the more I feel like this game is a production of bad decisions at management level. The choices to release two games back to back, breaking the established 3 studio rotation, the decision to make campaign mandatory co-op without actually making it fun for co-op, the always online requirement with no checkpoints, the use of AI generator to cut costs. All of these things point to a game that was rushed to market to meet some executive spreadsheet rather than given the time and resources it needed to be great. And that's what's so frustrating about Black Ops 7. There are some pieces of a really good game here. The core gameplay is solid. The PvE mode shows that they have some people on their team who understands how to make engaging PvE content. Zombies is a return to form for the mode, but it's all dragged down by terrible campaign and general feeling of corner cutting and cost saving measurements. It feels like Activision looked at how much money they were making from Call of Duty every year and decided they can get away with putting in less effort. And maybe they're right. Maybe enough people will buy it anyway because it's Call of Duty and that's what they do. But that definitely doesn't make it okay. Here's my honest recommendation. If you have Xbox Gaming Ultimate, Black Ops 7 is worth playing. You're not putting down $70, so the bad campaign less, and you can focus on multiplayer or zombies. If you're considering buying it outright, think carefully about what you want from a Call of Duty game. If you're purely a multiplayer person, it's a decent buy. If you care about campaigns, wait for us. And if you're on the fence, I say just hold off completely and see what post-launch supports look like. Maybe they'll patch in some quality of life improvement for the campaign. Maybe the seasonal content will add enough value to make it worth the price of admission, or maybe it'll just be more of the same. Who knows? For me personally, I'm extremely disappointed. I wanted to like this game. I went in hoping that maybe all the negative buzz was just overblown, that maybe people were just being too harsh. But after spending significant time with every mode, I can't shake the feeling that Black Ops 7 represents everything wrong with modern Call of Duty. It's a game made by a committee designed to check boxes on a feature list rather than creating a cohesive, enjoyable experience. The fact that the best part of the game, the in-game PvE mode, is locked behind the worst part of the game, the campaign, perfectly encapsulates the baffling decision-making that plagues the entire project. Look, I've been playing Call of Duty since the original Modern Warfare changed the landscape of the first-person shooter back in '07. I've seen the franchise at its best with Black Ops 2, Modern Warfare 2019, and even last year's Black Ops 6, which I thought was really a solid entry. And I've seen the worst with disasters like Ghost and Modern Warfare 3 back in 2023. Black Ops 7 sits somewhere in the bottom tier, not because everything about it is terrible, but because it's so cynical and uninspired. It feels like Activision knows they can coast on the name recognition and people will buy it just based on name anyway, so why bother trying? But here's the thing, we should demand better. We should demand better than AI generated art in a $7 game. We should demand campaigns that actually feel fun to play, especially when they're being sold as a major feature. We should demand respect for our time with reasonable checkpoints and the ability to pause a game in a single player mode. The fact that these things feel like too much to ask for in 2025 is absurd. If Black Ops 7 does anything positive, maybe it'll serve as a wake-up call that you can't just throw features at a game and expect it to work.